So thank you. Well, that's a very tough act to follow. I asked Kirby to change my time because I had a conflict. I guess I shouldn't have asked him to change my time to follow that act, unfortunately. But so great presentation, Mr. Bryce. Read your books. They've been great. So I'm here to talk about stripper wells. So this is a tough topic to talk about, mainly because there's a lot of emotion on there. There's a lot of kind of information floating around out there, some of it good, some of it bad. So I'm going to try to digest this and give some data on that. And I'm going to use what Mr. Bryce said. It's not my data, it's the data. So you might hear me say that once or twice. So I'm getting a little bit of information and advice from him. But before I get into the presentation, there's 3 points I want to make related to stripper wells. So number one, I think most of us in this room know there's legislation running through the legislature right now that has about 21 days left, and about the severance tax related to stripper wells and the exemption in that. I am not going to talk about that. I know we have something a little bit later from Garen. She'll bring that, and she'll be mentioning that, is what she said. So I will not be talking about the legislation. I think we all need to recognize in stripper wells that there are some issues throughout the state with some stripper wells, and we have to acknowledge that. Whether you're a local government or an operator. I live in Adams County. I live pretty close to some stripper wells. Some of them great, no issues. Some of them not so great and with issues. So I think we need to just acknowledge that up front. I'm not going to go into a big detail on it in my presentation because I'm trying to give facts, but I just wanted to say that outright. And number three, in parts of our state, mostly the DJ, there are operators, and some of you out there in the room right now, that are plugging stripper wells in because you're developing new horizontal wells in the same area, and you're still going to drain all those same minerals that the stripper wells are draining. So that's great. That's a win-win situation when and where that can happen. And that is happening in the DJ, a lot in Weld, a lot in Adams, but that is not possible statewide. So to assume that that model can happen statewide is not a good assumption right now, at least the way it is now. So those are the kind of three caveats. So let's see if I can get the, all right, look at that. All right, so what is a stripper well? So this is a formal definition, tax purposes, and you're not going to see, I don't believe you're going to see anywhere in the ECMC rule the term stripper well. You'll see low producing well, which has a different definition that I'll get into a little bit. But this presentation is on stripper wells in particular. And really what that is, if it's classified as an oil well, do they produce 15 barrels of oil on average each day over a 12-month period? If it's a natural gas well, it's 1,000 cubic feet of gas per day for any 12-month time frame. So that is what the definition of a stripper well is. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Again, you got low producing wells in the ECMC's definitions, which I believe is 2 barrels a day and 15 maybe MCF for natural gas. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about stripper wells. So before we dive a little bit more into Colorado, which is what we're here for, there is a National Stripper Well Association organization that collects data nationally on what stripper wells is. So I thought it'd be good just for everyone to get a kind of a sense of where we are nationally. There's about 760 active stripper wells in the United States, which accounts for about 76% of the wells. So quite a bit of number of wells nationally. And nationally, I'm going to compare Colorado to this based on the analysis I did. Stripper wells contribute 7.4% of all oil production and 8.2% of natural gas throughout the United States. So that's quite a big chunk there in there. So let's talk about Colorado. So this slide is just what I did. So I took data. I started with the ECMC's website. They have access databases out there that provide all production data for every well where a Form 7, for those of you who are on the operators, you know what a Form 7 is. For all the other ones, it's basically the monthly operation report where you have to state how much production was done by well. So if a Form 7 was submitted for a well in 2023, it was in that access database. And that database has several tables, it has some good queries. It's actually a really good database, so I commend the ECMC on that for sure. But it includes operator name, spud date. It also includes information on gas to oil ratio, which classifies a well as either a gas well or an oil well. And I was able to use and then of course it has the volume of production for each well for the 2023 year. So I was able to calculate the average oil per day, gas per day, and then classified each well as a stripper well or not, based on the definition up above. If there was no production, and a lot of them had no production reported, But if they were spud in 2020 to 2023, I did not classify them as a stripper well. Why would they be in that production or in that database if there was no production? Well, the rules are you need a Form 7 for the month you spud a well, begin drilling a well, all the way through P&A. So some of these wells drilled in 2020 to 2023 might have been spud, but they have not yet been completed yet or have not done production. So that's why they have that. And obviously it's not a stripper well if it was drilled in 2023, so I classified those out. So what did that database show? And again, I pulled this just a little while ago, April, so it included all of 2023. There were 48,091 wells reported in ECMC 2023 production database. Again, a Form 7 was submitted. Of those 48,091 wells, based on GOR analysis within that database, again, not my data, ECMC data, 29,285 were classified as gas wells, 9,542 as oil wells. 817 were spud between 2020 and 2023 and did not report production in 2023. So again, we're not classifying those 817 as stripper wells for this analysis. Then there were 8,447 that did not report any production in 2023 and were spud prior. Now, I know not all of these 8,447 are going to be stripper wells. Maybe a well was drilled in 2019, but still not completed. But I think that's not going to be that many of those 8,447. So I'll live by the don't let perfect be the enemy of the good here for this analysis. So maybe there's a couple hundred that are off here, but I think the analysis is going to be pretty solid. But I did want to state that up front. Okay. And anyone can go ahead and redo. That's why I put that slide on what I did. You can kind of redo what I did, and I suspect you'll get the same result. Stripper well production in Colorado 2023. So remember I said 29,285 based on the gas to oil ratio were gas wells. 22,015 of those produced less than 90 MCF a day. Therefore, it would be classified as a stripper well. So that's 75% of the gas wells in the state, by the legal definition of a stripper well, would be classified as a stripper well. And then 7,200 are more, so they're not a stripper well. I'll just call them a regular well, because I'm not very creative. Of the oil wells, the 9,542 oil wells, 5,900 of them had less than 15 barrels a day throughout all of year of 2023, therefore classified as a stripper well. So that's 62% of them, so a little bit less than the gas wells. And it makes sense when you start thinking about where are these wells and the DJ versus the Piceance and the Raton Basin. And then you had 38% that were regular wells. So what do those wells contribute to the state of Colorado in production? So these stripper wells, and again, I put it in BOE now, but they contributed over 62 million BOE in 2023 production to the state. When you look at the total BOE in the state from, again, the ECMC's website, that's about 12% of the total production in the state of Colorado come from wells that are stripper wells per the definition that I had on the very first slide. So 12%, which is much higher than the national average. Remember earlier I said national average was in the sevens and eights, I believe it was. So this is quite a bit more on there, so much higher. So let's talk about where these are. I mean, it's no surprise that the top two counties for stripper wells are the top two counties for overall wells. So Weld and Garfield, by far, are the top two. So we're sitting in Garfield County right now. This is the number 2 one. So also Yuma County, Los Animas County, and it goes down on there. So those are the top 10 counties that would have an impact if stripper wells were to go away. Who owns and operates these? Well, in short, it's a mix. You hear the narrative that it's just, these stripper wells are passed down from large operator to medium operator to small operator, and in some cases that's obviously true. But there's also a lot of large operators, big names here, that have these wells. So of the 36,372 as classified as stripper wells, about 39% of them are owned by the top 5 operators in the state of Colorado, top producing operators. So if you sort by production, top 5 own 39% of these. The top 10 own a majority at 56%. But there are a lot of smaller operators also. especially out in the eastern plains. I talked to a gentleman today when I was waiting in lunch, Yuma County operator. Yuma County is number 3 in those wells. So that's what they do, and all their wells in Colorado are in Yuma County. And they're all stripper wells, he said, every one of them. So there's a mix of who owns them. This slide's important. Horizontal wells may take a little bit of more time to hit these, but I think it's important to know that every well in its life at some point will eventually become a stripper well. It's not like a well is magically born a stripper well and stays a stripper well from day one to day whatever after 30 years of production. Wells start off producing a lot with the decline curve and then eventually taper off. And every well at some point will become a stripper well. Horizontal wells may take longer to get there, but eventually they will get there with this decline curve from the Energy Information Agency. Again, not my data, their data. So I think that's important to know, that it's not this mysterious well that's nobody knew it would ever become a stripper well. No, at one point it was a new well. Economic benefits. So as mentioned above, 12% of production in Colorado are from stripper wells. So let's say you got rid of, there are some that are advocating for the removal of all stripper wells, no matter what. I know that's not what the legislation is doing, but there is advocacy for that. But that 12% of oil and gas revenue distributed across the state, if that were to happen, that's a big impact as oil and gas wells. And I know we had an earlier presentation, they talked about the economics of oil and gas, but there's a lot of funding of special districts, fire protection districts, rural hospitals, public schools, library, and conservation districts. One example, one school district in Los Animas County, and Los Animas County is the 4th largest county with stripper wells, is funded 85% by oil and gas taxes. And most of those wells, about 90% of the wells in that county, are classified as stripper wells by what I showed earlier. So if you were to do something and keep adding on top of the economics of a stripper well, and eventually operators start plugging these, that is real impact on a real school district in a real county in real Colorado. So we have to be careful on what we're doing. So what's good for one county may be Weld County, and plugging some of these because you got new horizontals, which is great. If that could be done, may not be the right answer in Los Animas County or here in Garfield County. So we have to be very careful because these numbers are pretty big. And that's why the title of this is kind of a big deal. 12% is a big deal when you start looking at that. And I'm getting out of time here. But economic benefits, I'm not planning to talk about this slide a lot. You can have them, other than to point out, this is from Common Sense Institute, a newly released report. Some of the top counties, what are the oil and gas share of total property tax in the county? You can see some staggering numbers. Weld County, 61%. Garfield County, almost 56%. You go down the list, Los Animas, 27%. La Plata, 23%. There are a lot of issues. There are a lot of counties in Colorado that are dependent on oil and gas revenues, and stripper wells has a big slice of that per the data that was out there. Here's another slide that just continues the county with Adams County being highlighted. The ones who were highlighted were the top 10 counties that I talked about earlier. I think my last slide here before we take some questions is, how are stripper wells regulated in Colorado? Well, I talked earlier about the differences between a low producing well definition in the ECMC website, which is 2 BOE a day and not the 15 BOE. So again, remember, there's a difference between how the ECMC regulates. So, there is a difference between definitions between the two. But I think it's important to know that all ECMC rules, every rule, including the 400 series, the 600 series, 900 series, apply to every well in this state. Whether it is a stripper well, a regular well, a low producing well per their definition, they all have to follow those operational rules, the safety rules, the environmental rules in the 400, 600, and 900 series. That includes rules against venting and flaring, LDAR inspections, MIT requirements, Braden head tests. All of those rules apply to these wells, and they don't get scot-free on any of these requirements. Corrective action by the commission, Rule 210, if there's issues that are coming up with certain operators, with certain stripper wells, which we have seen, let's be honest, they can take corrective actions, and I believe they have. I think you can probably find the Denver Post articles about some of those examples very easily. Financial assurance rules. There are different requirements. There are stronger requirements, more financial assurance requirements if an operator averages, if their average daily per well production is lower, thereby taking in maybe some of the risk that's there if you have a smaller operator that only has stripper wells. That is being accounted for in the 700 series. So I would advocate that there are that these stripper wells are regulated very thoroughly in this state of Colorado, understanding that we still have an issue, and from time to time, for sure. I'd be lying if I said there were no issues, and I don't try to lie. But that's how it's regulated. I know that's a quick presentation. I wanted to give you some data on what it looks like, lay of the land on stripper wells, what they mean, what the percentage is, and how they are a big deal in several parts of the state of Colorado. With that, do we have any time for questions, or did I do a good job of making sure there's no questions?
You did a good job of dodging questions. So Dave will be around for the steak fry. Are you going to be here this evening?
Yeah, I'll be here for a little bit.
So be around and catch him this afternoon. That would be awesome. I very much appreciate it, and I appreciate your accommodation on our little time
Thank you.
crunch. So thank you so much.